masz czas, to odbierz, jak nie masz czasu, to nie odbieraj. No to...
Well, good morning, or sorry, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tank Museum. We're going to put on a display for you now that will last about half an hour, and hopefully by the end of it you'll have a much better idea what all those vehicles you can see inside the museum, what their role is on the battlefield, what they're actually there for, and a little bit about what the crews are up to inside those vehicles. Now, before we begin our display, the inevitable health and safety notices. First things first, the wind at the moment is mainly coming from the south. It may drift some of the smoke from the engine, some of the dust. You've noticed we've watered the track, but the vehicles do kick up a fair old bit as they go around. If it drifts towards you, just watch the children's eyes, watch your camera lenses and your sandwiches if you've got them out. During the course of the display, there'll be one or two very loud pyrotechnic bangs, and these will be coming unannounced. And I warn you now, they are loud. If you're of a particularly nervous disposition, this may not be the show for you. If for any reason we have to call an emergency, we will be asking you all, please, to walk out of our arena, go to the far side of the car park, gather your group together there, make sure you can account for everybody, and please wait there for further instructions from us. Please don't do the obvious thing and try and get in your car and leave the side. It may cause us more problems at the time. But we hope we don't have any issues like that today. Now, we're going to start off our display by showing you some of the different types of vehicle the Royal Armoured Corps uses. That's the corps, the group of soldiers that all use armoured vehicles in the modern British Army. And we're going to start off by showing you an example of one of the types of vehicles that, even though it's very, very small, is actually very important on the battlefield. Before any army goes forward, it likes to scout out where the enemy are, or do, as they call it in the military, reconnaissance. And this vehicle here, this is called a Ferret Scout Car, and it's ideal for that scouting role. This particular vehicle, it came into service with the British Army back in the 1950s. You can see its predecessor, the Dingo Scout Car, that's in the museum, that was used by the British forces in World War II. And the Ferret was sold all around the world because it's so good for its job. Why is it so good? It's small. And if you're small on the battlefield, you're much harder to hit by the enemy. It's also actually quite fast. It can get up to about 55 miles an hour on the open road, which for a 3-ton armoured vehicle is actually a pretty nippy vehicle. Inside that vehicle, there's a 2-man crew. Now, at the moment, you can see the driver. He's got his hatches open. He's based in the front. He can see where he's going with those hatches open at the moment. If he's shot at, or if shell fire comes in, he closes those hatches down and he looks out of glass periscopes. And again, on lots of the armoured vehicles, you'll see those little glass periscopes. The idea there is if a bullet or shrapnel hits a glass, it may crack the glass, but nothing comes inside the vehicle to injure the crew. And they all have a quick release mechanism. Out drops the old periscope. They always carry spares, in goes a new one, off they go again. So it protects the driver. In the top of this vehicle, in that little turret, the commander sits. And he's there with the radio and the binoculars, and his role is reporting back all the time what he's seeing about the enemy. The machine gun there, what they call a general purpose machine gun, GPMG, you'll see all the guys using them out in Afghanistan at the moment. That machine gun, to be honest, is really there for moral support for the crew. If they bump into the enemy, quick burst of machine gun fire, and then they back off quick. Now, otherwise we're going to get a quick raid on us by the army there. Based down here at Bovington, you must remember this is a working military establishment, so training is going on all the time with the soldiers around us. So back to the Ferret, very small, very compact, very speedy, there for reconnaissance. As with most armoured vehicles, it's got a lot of items on it that you'll see on vehicles in the museum, things like shovels, picks, spades, tow ropes. The little silver box on the back there, that's a cooker. British soldiers have to look after themselves in the field. You don't have hot food brought up to you. So again, very important item. The minute the vehicle stops, out for a brew of tea, very important for the morale factor. There's also things on this vehicle you'll see inside the museum, on a lot of them, these stubby little tubes on the front wings. They're what's called smoke dischargers. And again, you'll see them sometimes on tank turrets. The idea there is if you come under attack at all, you can press a button inside the vehicle, out of those little tubes fires a smoke grenade. It's about the size of a Coke can. Nice big smoke screen, it hides the vehicle from view from the enemy, and you can back off or reposition yourself. So again, very useful feature. Now the vehicle is powered by a Rolls-Royce engine. This particular generation, it's got a petrol engine in. Nowadays the Army tends to only use diesel engines in their vehicles, and that's because diesel is slightly harder to set on fire than petrol. So if you're hit by the enemy, diesel engines, you tend to have a little bit more time to get out the vehicle before it goes up in flames. Quite important for what they call crew survivability. What's your chances of surviving being hit by the enemy? The other important thing about having a one fuel policy that the Army has today is it means you don't make the mistake of putting the wrong fuel type in the vehicle at the wrong time. You know the arguments that you have with a family car if you do it. You imagine on the battlefield your commander is not going to be happy if you ruin an engine at a crucial moment. So there's a Ferret Scout car, nipping about, going ahead of the main forces, radioing back information all the time. What's the best way to get forward? What's the best way to attack the enemy? And hopefully finding a little bit about the enemy to report back as well. The vehicle's actually, as I mentioned, it's quite nippy. It also can go just as fast backwards as it can forwards. It's got 5 reverse gears. And if you can imagine, if you meet a tank down a narrow lane, you don't be faffing around doing a 3-point turn. You whack it into reverse and you can go just as fast backwards out the way. So very, very useful feature. Now the next type of vehicle coming on, again you can see this one, it's not a tank, but again, very, very important. This is what they call an APC, or Armoured Personnel Carrier. Now those of you who've been around our trench display, you can see a diorama with the very first tanks attacking. They went at about 3 or 4 miles an hour when they were driving forward, and the infantry, the soldiers, were marching up behind them. The tank was to crush down the barbed wire to let our soldiers get in those German trenches without getting massacred in between. That was the idea. By the Second World War, tanks are doing many more things, and they're a lot faster as well. And to keep the infantry up with the tanks, they built half-track vehicles. You've seen those in all the war movies. And after World War II, lots of countries built vehicles like this, a box on tracks for taking the soldiers forward. And this particular one, this was made for the British Army back in the 1960s. Now in the back of this vehicle, we've got some volunteers that we picked out the audience a bit earlier. They're giving you a bit of a wave there. You can see them, the hatches are open. And they're going to show us a bit later in our display how an armoured vehicle like this is actually used in a combat situation. But this vehicle, it's called the FV, Fighting Vehicle 432, never ended up with a nice sexy name like Challenger or Chieftain, it just stuck with its production number. It went into service back in the 60s and it's still actually in service in the British Army today. You'll see them driving around the roads here. we've seen a load-carrying vehicle, and we've seen a tank. And I've now been waffling for about 25 minutes, so you can all start waking up now if the Sherman didn't, firing its gun didn't wake you up. Because we want a little bit of audience participation now. So the first thing then is, are you all on holiday? Comes like that, boy. Are you all on holiday?
Yeah!
Right, that's more like it. So in other words, you didn't probably do what you normally do when you're back at home this morning, which is turn on the breakfast news or get out your normal paper or turn the radio on. Because if you did, you would have seen the very disturbing news that last night down at Lulworth the Ruritanian army landed. And I warn you now, the Ruritanians are a nasty lot, and we know they're heading this way to capture this very important mound behind us here at Bovington. And if any of the children in the audience here, and that means big kids as well as little kids, hear or see any Ruritanians coming this way, I want to hear you start screaming. They've got a big black flag with a skull and crossbones on, and we want to know all about it. So where are they? Oh, come on, you can do better than that. You must be in one panto. Where are they? Right, here comes the Ruritanians then. These are the baddies, remember that? Now they get their tanks from all over the place, the Ruritanians. They're an odd lot. This tank, what have they got today? They've got, this is what they've got here. This is a Leopard tank. This is what the Germans made after the Second World War. And they decided that they wanted a big, powerful, fast tank rather than lots of armour. So they built this tank, the Leopard tank, and they put something great big powerful, you can hear it, something called an MTU diesel engine in there. And they thought the best way of surviving on the battlefield is to be fast and mobile. Not put lots of thick armour plate on, just make sure you're nippy. So that was a great success of the Leopard, and lots of countries bought the Leopard tank in the 1970s and 80s. Now, so there's the Ruritanians, they found the mound there. And even though actually it was a tank built by the Germans, that's a British gun on it, the 105mm gun. We saw the 76. Yes, all right, thank you. That gun there's 105mm across the hole at the end of the barrel, very powerful. It was a gun that was put on the British Centurion tank, and lots of countries, the Americans, the Germans, other countries, they bought the gun off us because it was such a good anti-tank gun. Now, looks like he's going to take down the Union flag. Going to show him what we think about this. The other thing about tanks is they always have the thickest armour on the front. So you always try and position your tank with the best protection, so the front facing where you think the enemy's going to come from, because then obviously you're best protected that way. So the Ruritanians, they position their tank there ready to defend the position. Now, let's see if you were paying attention a bit earlier on. Let's just imagine the British armies, they've got to come back and capture this mound. What's the first thing the British army's going to have to do in a situation like this? Make a cup of tea. No, we're talking about the army, not the RAF. Come on, what would they do? Right, somebody was paying attention. They'd send out their scout car, wouldn't they? They need to know what's the best way of getting at those Ruritanians, what's the best way for the force to attack them, and hopefully to report back as well. Do the Ruritanians look a motivated force? How many are there? This guy can't even have a shave. Do they look like a disciplined bunch? And all that information is useful to the main force commander if he can report it all back in time. So hopefully, sneaking up the field in a second will be our ferret scout car reporting that information back over the radio so that the tanks know what they're going to attack, where they're going. There's a military phrase, they say time spent on reconnaissance is rarely wasted. So never commit your main force until you really know what you're going to be attacking and what's going on. And the other thing with that ferret scout car, he's radioing the information back. Of course, the other thing he can always do as well, if necessary, he can call down an airstrike or artillery fire onto the Ruritanians without them hopefully ever seeing him. He'd be hiding away in a wood somewhere, calling in the airstrike, calling in the artillery fire. Of course, in reality, he'd never get this close to the enemy. Something's gone badly wrong if you ever get this close, and you'd have to back off quick. But the important thing is he gets the information back to the main force commander. And as I said earlier, if you've got a big 60-ton tank, Challenger 2 is well over 60 tons now, the one the army uses, you've got to also know the roads can take you. You don't want to cross a bridge and find it collapses and you lose your tank. So all that information back to the force commander so he knows what he's doing. Now, we know the British Army's a bit busy at the moment, so they're sending on the Sherman tank from the museum, Ruritanians, and there in the background as well, there's our armoured personnel carrier with the infantry in. And again, very important, the infantry. However many tanks you've got, you still need those soldiers to capture the ground. Now, they could have been bouncing around in that position, in that vehicle, for a long time on the battlefield. So they always try and aim the vehicle at where they think the enemy's going to be. So the soldiers in the back know where they're attacking towards. Now, those of you, it's probably hidden from some of you by the mound, but the infantry, they're jumping out the back of the vehicle there, and they're putting in what's called a section attack. Don't forget, these are the volunteers we picked out the audience a bit earlier on. And the section commander there is getting them all, dropping them down. And this is what the military call, they're putting in what they call a pepper pot attack. So one section runs forward, it drops down, and then the other section comes forward and drops down as well. And they try and keep in a straight line. And again, it's not because the army just likes its discipline in straight lines for no good reason. It's so you don't run in front of your mate and get shot up the backside. The media calls that friendly fire. It's the most unfriendly fire going if you're shot by your own side. So here they come forward. They've got the enemy tank in their sights now. They're progressing forward. Bit of fitness training I think is going to be required by one or two of them. Up they get, and they're charging the enemy tank. And look, oh, look at that. Pathetic Ruritanians are thrown in the town already. Well done, our infantry. Well done. Now, it actually takes the British Army to get a Phase 1 recruit about 6 weeks to do your basic infantry training. So our volunteers there, they've managed to do that in about 20 minutes. And they did volunteer, they all came out the audience we asked for a bit earlier on, so they've done very well there. And with any luck, we'll see the Union flag going up the flagpole in a moment, so we can all sleep safely in our beds tonight. Of course, what we didn't tell the volunteers is they're all going to have a sensible haircut in a moment and spend the rest of the afternoon washing down the vehicles. There we go. So we've got the Union flag back up. Well done. That's it. Well done, our volunteers there. Now, what we're going to do for you now, ladies and gentlemen, the Ruritanians will take off into custody, fear not. We'll then clear the vehicles from the field. Our rise vehicle will be going on throughout the rest of the afternoon. If you've got your tickets already, please show those as you're going back in the museum. If you want to have your picnic out here on the grounds, please do. And don't forget as well, that ticket is a year's membership of this museum. So as long as the person who signed the gift aid form comes back, you can bring that many people back here. So do make the most of that if you've got the opportunity. And if you are on holiday, you might like to know, 4th of August, next Wednesday, not this week, next week, we've got a band concert here. The Army's big band are coming down and playing a concert here in the evening. £10 for a ticket, under 14s are free, so if you want to pop along and listen out to that, please do. You can get tickets at front reception. So if you are on holiday, which I think most of you are, have a really good time down here in Dorset, and thank you very much for coming along to the Tank Museum today. Thank you.